Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Amina Al Dean with you from Muslim Network TV and my program Critical Talk. There's so much going on, and I'm trying my best to make sure we cover things that are important to us indigenously as a community. By indigenously, I mean here in America. And I have the privilege of having with me Dr. Ihsan Bagby, who is a professor in the Department of Islamic Studies at the University of Kentucky, where his research is, critical to our having not only healthy communities, but knowing about communities across the U.S. He has done, and I'm going to name them as I get to them rather than give you all of them in one pot. But in addition to that, I wanted to pick your brain on Muslims. This uh, seems to me like a flood of Muslims running for various reasons. Some for jobs, some for green cards, some because it's where they can get in to Christian seminaries. What can a Muslim? How would a Christian seminary, who can only have a couple here and there of adjunct Muslim scholars teaching, teach someone how to be a Muslim chaplain or an imam?
That is the situation that really motivated me, 10 years ago, I think, in a conversation I was having with Jimmy Jones, Dr. Jimmy Jones, and Dr. Sherman Jackson about this situation that we have. Muslims want to be chaplains. Many Muslims want to be chaplains. There are jobs that are available, steady, well-paid jobs too.
All right, with benefits.
But you need, for many of these positions, you need a degree. You need some kind of training in what they would think of as chaplaincy.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you go? And at the time when Jimmy Jones and Sherman Jackson and I were sitting down, there were really no clear alternatives.
Right.
Now there are now, but still it is a shame for the community that Muslims who want to be Muslim chaplains go to Christian seminaries. And I like Hartford Seminary. I have dealt with them. In fact, much of my research is actually tied to the Hartford Institute of Religious Research, which is based in the Hartford Seminary. So Hartford Seminary are our friends, but I'm sorry. The Hartford Seminary is not the place that Muslims should get their Islamic education to be a chaplain. And in my last U.S. Mosque Survey 2020, there's only a handful of imams. I didn't study chaplains. Only a handful of imams who have got degrees from America. And the institution that has provided most of those degrees, there's only a handful, are from Hartford Seminary. That's the place to go for the most part, because it's, one, accessible, and it's also Muslim friendly, but it does not provide a solid Islamic education. They don't even require Arabic. How can you be a chaplain? How can you be an imam and not have under your belt a good, solid understanding, fluency in Arabic? It just doesn't make any sense.
It could be that you're from Senegal and your fluency is in Wolof and French.
Yeah.
And even though they're writing Wolof in Arabic, you probably don't speak Arabic. And the people that you would speak with, be a comfort for, don't speak Arabic.
Yeah. But if you go through the Islamic educational system in Senegal,
Right.
or Gambia, or any place in West Africa, or any place in the world,
That's true. That's true.
you will have to master
I
Arabic.
suffered too, please.
That's
I don't want to go back to those days. But the other thing is the basic moral foundation, philosophical understanding, because now I'm hearing, and I know my colleagues like you are hearing it also, a lot of Christian conceptualizations and terminology. What was it? My husband just told me, blessed to be stressed, not stressed, or something of the other, and blessed and highly favored. And I'm all of these things which don't quite fit. So are we Protestantizing Islam under the guise of Muslim chaplains who want to be imams, and this is the way to get to be an imam, or chaplains who actually want to be chaplains?
well. Let's hope this is simply the result of the initial stage of the development of Islamic seminaries and Islamic institutions of learning, and that this is what we just have a phase we have to go through. But you're right that the actual challenge of an Islamic education is understanding the traditional, being well versed in the traditional,
Right.
also having an analysis of the purposes of the law as they relate to your present circumstances here in America, and also a critical understanding of the circumstances that we exist in.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not even enough to have traditional understanding. We also have to have an understanding of how this is applied. And there's no way a Christian seminary will be able to do that, not even half of that. And as a result, as you say, you get concepts, philosophies that just don't match up with Islam. I mean, I don't want to put down the many Muslim chaplains that are out there who have, to go through Christian seminaries, because they're, well intended, but they have to do more homework. Now, we do have emerging Muslim seminaries. As I said, 10 years ago, maybe it was 15 years ago, there was, nothing. But now there are. And there's Muslims recognize the need for an Islamic seminary.
True.
And in fact, mosque leaders, all the ones I talked to, would prefer to have an imam who is preferably American born with a solid education, or somebody who is from overseas but has studied here for some time.
Yeah, because he wouldn't know any of the stuff on the ground, which has always been a problem of ours here, making uh, proclamations and this, that, and the other. And they've never lived, they haven't lived here for a hot minute.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are, three institutions I think that are have initiated a seminary and are on the road. None are firmly fixed. Bayan used to be in Claremont, and I think are now more based in Chicago. And there's Darul Qalam in Dallas. And then there's Islamic Seminary of America that's also based in Dallas. All three of those offer programs, serious programs, but they're still in the initial stage of development.
But, it seems to me that given, I just had a program last night and we talked about widows and the need for the masajid to come to grips with the whole, all of the diversity, generational and otherwise, in their communities, and to at some point people got to strive to make a healthy community. Something else I'm going to get back to you with in a moment. But in that, one of the things that became apparent was that many of the imams want to floor people if they have a little bit of Arabic, and it's usually not good Arabic, but a little bit of Arabic. And the subject matter has nothing to do with them living their lives as Muslims, or the issues they confront, or the concerns that they confront. What do we do? I mean, all of these places, I think Bayan has some courses online, but it has an adjunct faculty from here and a more permanent faculty who are immigrants. And many of the people also coming to these places are going to be African American. They should not have to be schooled in Arab culture.
Yeah, yeah. The reality is that in my, again, 2020 U.S. Mosque study, 97% of all full-time paid imams were educated overseas.
Right.
Over 75% actually came from overseas.
Right.
And they're totally unprepared. And the reality is that our imams, who are volunteer imams for the most part, most of them African Americans, are not trained also. They're not trained in the issues of kind of the pastoral sciences of counseling and things like that. So we have a long way to go. But people are thinking about it. You're thinking about it. A lot of people are thinking about it. And, there's a twofold need. One, kind of training programs, both for our imams from overseas and also our volunteer imams, in the necessary skills of an imam. And then you need a more full-fledged Islamic education, an Islamic.
I mean, if you can do law school online, why can't we do the basic fundamentals of an Islamic education? They don't have to spend all the time that you and I spent in school, thank God, online basic Islamic education, because without it, they're really not of all the help they could be to their communities.
No question.
And I think that we then begin to grow a learned class.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sherman Jackson talked about Quranic literacy, Islamic literacy, and there is a need actually to set a standard for what an imam should know, and a chaplain, because both should have the same kind of training in Islam. A chaplain might have more training in counseling and that type of thing, but there should be, a basic training for both. And we have no standard of what is required, what should be required, what is expected for an imam. And, people are working on it, but it has not developed yet, so that we can go to a masjid that has a volunteer imam and basically say, this is the standard, and we want to help you reach that standard through online, whatever, but to provide the courses. Now, people are thinking about this type of thing, but it just has not manifest. We're still in a baby stage in terms of development, and there's no consensus on that standard.
Well, it seems like when you men get together, you all never can reach a consensus.
Oh,
women do not have that problem. But at the moment, I am going to take a 2-minute break. Please feel free to have some water or some tea our coffee. This is a conversation. This is Dr. Amina Aldin, and I'm speaking with Dr. Ihsan Bagby. And we're talking about Muslims and Christian seminaries. And we're also going to talk about a number of reports on the conditions of the masajid, because he's done a lot of those studies. And also, we're going to talk about how to build a healthy community. This is Amin Al Dean. We'll be right back for Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. Did you hear me? I don't know if you heard it. I just repeated what I had to say, but that's okay. You don't need to hear too much about yourself. So, how can we move beyond baby steps toward laying a foundation? Because on the other end of things, we have folks who didn't want to do Islamic studies, perhaps because of the rigors, perhaps because of the expense, perhaps perhaps. And they've done anthropology, sociology, and history, and now claim Islamic studies expertise. What do we do with all of this wonderful smorgasbord of Islamic experts?
Set a standard. The reality is the reality.
Mm-hmm.
We need those scholars that stand out, that kind of show the way of how to be well versed in the Islamic text, the Islamic tradition, and how Islam is implemented in the American context, in particular, setting the example. I must say that you have an interest, in chaplaincy, in imams, but right now the imam position in many mosques is not enviable.
About that.
And unfortunately, it's not an appealing career choice for many people. And
Well, say
so, you
more
know,
about that. Say, why is it not? Why is it unenviable?
well, because for one, um, the imam in the American context is a new reality.
Yeah.
We don't have a working model uh, from overseas or even in the tradition, right?
Right.
So we have to kind of invent what is the role of the imam in the American mosque.
Mm.
And we are still struggling with that. And so, in many cases, the board is not simply imam friendly. The boards are often either micromanaging or uh,
That's not funny, but I have to laugh.
yeah, and they overwork the imam, underpay them,
Yeah.
and the tension between imams and boards is
Outrageous.
rife, and imams talk about it all the time. Um,
Especially those imams in the African American community who don't get paid.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work, and you know our community is young.
Yes.
It's not like we've been around the block for a long time, although you and I have been around the block.
Watch that. Watch it. Watch it. Watch it.
but but overall, you know, in the broad narrative of history, we are newcomers.
Yes.
We are newcomers to the American scene. Muslims as a whole are relatively newcomers to the West. And so we're still establishing ourselves. But you know, the reality is in my research, I think that Muslims have done as well a job as any other religious group
Absolutely.
in America. I think our work and our achievements can stand beside Jews in their history when they came here in numbers
Hmm.
in the early 1900s. It could be compared to other religious groups from, you know, the Irish and the Italians who came here. We've achieved quite a bit when our numbers really exploded, you know, in the 60s, 70s. That's, of course, Islam has been in this country for a long, since the beginning and before the beginning of this country. But in terms of numbers, in terms of the establishment of institutions, we're still very young. We're still very young. And we've done quite a good job. In fact, you know, I hang out with researchers in of other faith groups, of other, you know, Christian denominations, and we're the envy. We are the envy of other groups because our masjid is filled on Friday.
Yeah.
And even though so many young adults are, you know, dissatisfied, young adults still attend the masjid in good numbers, good percentage. I mean, they're absent from churches and synagogues.
Right.
And when other researchers look at us, they are so amazed, in a sense, how healthy we are. But you know what they tell me,
Mm.
Sister Amina? They say, wait a while.
Wait for a
You're
minute.
doing good now because you're young.
Yeah.
You're, you're a young community. But, you know, wait for 3 and 4 generations and you'll have the same diseases and the same problems. And that's our challenge, that we avoid that.
Well, you know, part of that challenge comes directly. Oh, I hear an echo from the imam.
Yeah.
If you go to a mosque, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of any one of a number that I've peeked in on. And if you're a male, You're sitting there hoping to hear something that's going to assist you in navigating the world in which you live. What you are likely to hear, depending, is some Urduized Arabic, some African American English Arabic, or a full Arabic lecture where you don't have a clue as to what anybody said in any of those spaces. So you leave, you've done your duty, but have you gotten some nourishment,
Yeah.
you know, to keep you going?
Yeah. I've been doing many studies. One of the most significant has been the ISPU remaking Muslim spaces, where we looked at masajid and their relationship to, in particular, young adults, women, and converts.
Mm.
And we did a narrative analysis of, we did so many interviews, hundreds of
Mm.
interviews,
Yeah.
focus groups. And, we did analysis of word usage. And one of the key words and the key concepts that was voiced by our interviewees was the word relevant.
Mm-hmm.
That is so attractive to them. If they go to a masjid and hear a khutbah, they hear a talk that's relevant, that
Right.
talks about the issues, as you said, helps them understand how to live as a Muslim in this world today, or how to even just understand the issues and problems. What's the Muslim perspective, Islamic perspective on all of this? And
Yeah.
see, that requires two things. See, it requires that solid traditional understanding so
Right.
that everything can be related through the lens of Quran in particular and Sunnah. And that's where, you want that good Arabic and good understanding of the Arabic, right? But then you also, want a real understanding of the dynamics on the ground that are happening and how Islam relates to that. Again, that is a higher level. And so we have some imams who understand the dynamics on the ground, but don't have a solid background in kind of the tradition and can't fit them together. And then there are some from overseas who have the traditional, but and many times they're even scared to, kind of delve into,
Right.
the issues. I was so disappointed in seeing after the George Floyd, murder. I was in a masjid and there was no mention.
Oh, we had.
A general khutbah on, I forgot what it was on, but it was very forgettable. And
Right.
your heart is aching.
Right, exactly. That happened in Chicago. I remember I got a text screaming, one of my former students talking about I went there to get some solace in my grief, and what I got was a khutbah on wudu. And I said, well, either that particular man did not know how to handle it,
Yeah,
or
that's
had no interest. And I prefer to think it was the former as
former.
opposed to the latter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I see that there is also, and I want to talk about this just a teeny bit, the rising, what some African American scholars have called attempts at erasure of African American Muslims. In text, there is a quote unquote black narrative that has even been transferred on to Muslims. So rather than, for example, hear what Malcolm has to say in the environment what he was in, you focus on red hair and being in jail and all of this other kind of stuff. So I'm wondering what, and I've had the fortune to go to this Black psychology intensive, and some of the people there, not all, were very, very upset with this attempt at erasure.
Hmm.
I have money, so I can erase those who don't.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the reality is that Islam as a phenomena in America is usually ignored as a whole.
Yeah.
Not only the African American Muslim experience, but other experiences also. But you're right, the African American experience, especially after the heyday of the Nation of Islam, when there was press and interest, but that died down. That the interest in African American Muslims is not there. If I could tell you a little story, I was in the the Schoenberg Library, right, of Black culture there in the middle of Harlem, and they had a display on antebellum Black religion, and a big display. Nary a mention
of us.
of Muslims.
Get out of here. In the Schoenberg.
In the Schoenberg. And here's another story. I was in Gullah country, and I have a terrible memory, but I'm in one of the islands there off the coast, right, of South Carolina, and they have
the Geechee Islands.
Yes, right, the Geechee Islands, and they had the Gullah Museum. It's really a big house that they turned into it, and they had a nice library, books for sale too. And I went to the director, and I said, I'm actually researching the connection between Islam and the enslaved African Muslims and that relationship with the Gullah people. And the director told me, she said, there is no relationship.
So he didn't watch Dash's movie, Julie Dash's movie at all.
I don't know if that's willful. She's African American. She's African American. She was African American.
I know, but
what I'm trying to say, it's something that runs across the board. It's something that is endemic in the Western academy, where religion is suspect as it is, but the African American Muslim experience is even more marginalized.
It continues. I'm going to take another quick break, and I want to come back, and I want to go through the 2020 master's study, and I also want to go through why, I don't know if it came out by ISPU, but I think so, that there's a decline in African American masajid. This is Dr. Amina Aldin here having a wonderful reunion with Dr. Ihsan Bagby for Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Amina Aldin with Muslim Network TV on Critical Talk with Dr. Ihsan Bagby, and exploring a number of things. We've talked about Muslims in Christian seminaries. We've begun to talk about the Imams and Chaplains, and now I want to just turn our attention a little bit to some very interesting surveys, and I have some research questions because I want to know if my name is Jill Jones. How do you find me? And I'm Muslim, and my parents was Muslim, and my grandparents were Muslim. How do you find me to call me to survey?
Well, that's why I focus on masajid.
Oh, you get away with all of it.
Yeah, because a masjid is a unit that you can explore. You can talk to people. Your broad surveys of individuals, pose many problems. And when I first got started in kind of considering what to do, how to do it, I said that, trying to survey individuals is just too hard. Even Pew, I sit on Pew's advisory board every time they do a study, and they do it, about every 7 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm on the advisory board, and they have to go through so many hoops. But they do get around it. So, actually what they do is they take Muslims who identify themselves as Muslim in other surveys. So in other words, they'll be surveying everybody, and one of the standard questions is, what is your religion or whatever. And so a David, Pope will say, I'm a Muslim. And so when they do the Muslim study, David Pope gets thrown in. So, but even then, it's to me not very satisfying. But anyway, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of money to do that.
I know. Not that Pew doesn't have it, but I know.
Yeah.
Now tell us about this 2020 survey.
Well, every 10 years, I do a comprehensive study of all the masjids in America, and we count all the masjids. So, for instance, again, my saying that we are a healthy community is based on the fact that the number of our masajid have increased. In 2000, we counted about 1,200. In 2010, we counted about 2,100. And in 2020, we counted 2,800. So every year, a substantial percentage increase. So, we've been doing this and honed the skill. I'm finished though, Amina. It's over. I'm 2030. Somebody else gotta do 2030 because the law blesses me that I'm here. I'll help. But don't ask me to do no work, please.
Okay. I got it. So, what were some of the significant findings?
Well, one, how healthy we are.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the one real surprising statistic that caught me off guard, very disappointing for me, because as you know, I am African American. I'm a proud African American.
Right.
And I come out of the African American Muslim community. And so I care very much. And so the statistics were very glowing on everybody else, but they were not good for African American masajid in terms of numbers. Now, what they do still looks good in comparison to other masjids. But so out of the percentage of African American masjids, and we have a formula for what constitutes an African American, Arab, South Asian masjid, is based on Juma attendance. It's a little complicated formula, but based on that formula, we say we will classify this masjid as African American, or South Asian, or Arab, or whatever, Southeast Asian. So in 2020, 13% of all American masjids were African American, but that compares to 23% being African American masjids in 2010, and in 2000 it was close to 30% that were African American. So the number has gone down. And I scratch my head because more follow-up research would have to be done to get a sense of what's behind this phenomena. Also, the percentage, and actually, if that's just a percentage, if you look at actual numbers, they have also declined. So not just the percentage, but the actual number. And the big question is why. And I really need to see organizations start tackling that question and start coming up with answers and then solutions. I've felt always very good about MANA, Imam Siraj Wahaj, and now Imam Zaid Shakir, who leads it, that this is the task for a MANA, that they, really tackle this. But the Association of Imam Al Dean Muhammad.
Right.
And in fact, one of our problems is we need to stop talking past one another and put our heads together. And that is, all of the African American Muslim masjids, because we're really in the same boat, and start figuring out what's happening. But real quickly, demographically, I did do a look at the 2010 African American masjids and the 2020. And what I saw is that the African American masjids that no longer exist were all small masjids.
Oh, okay.
They were small masjids in smaller towns, right? Okay. Or small African American masjid in big cities.
But small, like storefronts?
Well, just not storefronts, because you have big storefronts, right? But small Juma attendance.
Okay.
So, back in 2010, they had 20, 30, maybe 50 people attending. And it sounds like human nature. When you have a small number, you don't have activities, when the enthusiasm goes down, then it's possible that the masjid will fall apart. But I must say that I think the overall reason for the decline, though, is the slowdown in conversions. So in 2020, the conversion rate per mosque were 11 people. So on average, 11 people over a 12-month period converted. That's 2020. In 2010, it was 15 per masjid. And then in 2000, it was more like 17. So you see the decline in conversions, and this is true for all the masjids, African American and others. And I one of the reasons why the Arab and South Asian masjids are doing well is immigration.
Right.
Immigration is supplying new members. Right. How do African American masjids get new members?
Right.
Conversion.
Right.
And when conversion slows, then that stops up the pipeline of new members. And to me, that is maybe the main issue here. And of course, that needs a lot of unpacking as to what's going on.
That's where we need those urban anthropologists and sociologists to get in there and take that data you've collected and work on it. I'll pass it around. But let me use this last section for you to talk about. You did a report on building a healthy masjid community. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, this research is focused on the question of the growing dissatisfaction, disconnect between Muslim young adults, women, converts with masjids. Now, I must say that ISPU study and Pew studies has shown that Muslims have not lost young adults or women or converts. In other words, we are not the situation of Christian churches and Jewish synagogues where basically the young adults are not present.
Right.
We have not reached that point, but clearly we have a growing unhappiness with masjids. And so the research focused on that. And we did focus groups all over America, interviews with everybody. And basically, we came up with a few factors. One is the most attractive thing about masjids for young adults, women, and converts is the sense of being welcomed in the masjid.
Yeah, we're being feeling welcome.
And so many masjids, you are just a person who happens to be there, and you're ignored,
Right.
you know, and so the masjids that young adults, women, and converts like is the masjid that they feel welcomed in. When they come in, they get a smile and a salam.
Exactly.
And so that's what I just did a workshop yesterday, and we had 25 people on the workshop. It was a 2-hour plus workshop, basically with masjid leaders about how to make your masjid welcoming. Now, the other factor is being relevant or dynamic. So people, when they come in, they want to hear a relevant khutbah. They want to see activities that relate to the issues. They want to see something more than, as you mentioned, just learning how to make wudu, or how to make salah properly. Now that's important. Now, I'm very clear that all those things are important, but the masjid cannot only focus on those things. They have to have an array of activities and opportunities for people to get involved, from environmental issues to social justice issues, to food desert issues, to, there's so many issues that masjids can and must be involved in. And this is attractive. And I think, even as you think of conversions, I mean, a person considering Islam, that's what they want to feel. They want to feel some excitement going on here. There's some action going on. There's a mission here. That's what I stress, that, if you walked into the masjid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and, you're relatively new, one of the first things you would understand that these people want a community, strong brotherhood, but they got a mission. You just can't you can't sit down or go home and that's it. No, you're expected to get involved. And so that's how our masjid should feel, that there's a mission and that there are numerous activities that come out of that mission.
Yeah. Well, I see that Sangoni, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, was greeting us. And I think that they're in Senegal. And they were on last night giving us some input, not last night before last, giving us some input. But, that is so important. And you have women who, lawyers, other civil rights workers who are out putting their lives on the line. They come to the masjid. Well, you got to go back there across the street or up somewhere, or, we got to hide you. And on top of that, we don't want to use your skills.
Yeah.
The Imam knows everything. We don't need psychologists or lawyers or medical doctors or any of those things. And I know for the women's side, that is so unwelcoming, so disrespectful.
Yeah.
That many just say, okay, I will listen to the blessing of the pandemic has been the khutbah online. If there's been a blessing, it has been the khutbah online. So I hate to end our conversation because these are so, I mean, these are really, really important issues. But one last thought, and that is that I know Mana is doing a series. I don't know if they're webinars or seminars on young Black men. You want to say a word or two?
Yeah. This has become one of the priorities of kind of the revival of Manna. Manna is associated with many people who are focused on young adult, in particular, young brothers, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and their nurturing in Islam. And many of these people, want to share their knowledge. Hamza Abdul Malik in Memphis has a wonderful program, a dynamic community. They've actually kind of taken over one of the poor areas of Memphis where all the housing is cheap, and so they have, young men. And then Atiba Jones out of Atlanta, mashallah, he is one of the best young men
Wow.
programs. And he's going to speak on, I'm sorry, I wish he's going to speak on this Sunday
Okay.
on the issue of raising young men. And,
I'm gonna do it again.
if I could just briefly say that, African American Muslims are probably, bedeviled by the lack of a conversion, but also, and maybe even more so, it's problematic that so many of their children have not also become active Muslims in the community.
Well, I think that there was when you and I were slightly younger. We were so busy. We were all over the place. We were producing newspapers. We were making sure children had stuff to do after school. We were doing a whole bunch of stuff. And I have to honestly say, I don't think women were omitted because we weren't going to let you omit us. And it might have been a sign of the times. Could have very well been that.
Not
But,
not omit you.
but stop it. But I think that it seemed to decline.
Mm.
That level of act, there was always something going on at the masjid, and that level of activity seems to have declined. So we just have to
But
get back.
there, there are many African American masjids in particular that are doing quite well because I think they have adopted this attitude of being welcoming to everybody and being dynamic and also being grounded in Islam. The Atlanta uh, Mosque of El Islam, Masjid Allah in Philadelphia,
Right.
Islam, Masjid Ibadullah in LA. I mean, they have dynamic, wonderful programs, and they're doing well.
Okay.
And many of them are with the Association of Imam Muhammad,
Right.
but they have, kept Imam Muhammad, but also embraced the Quran and Sunnah as being a guide also. And
Did
so,
you have them in this meeting you just had with leaders of communities?
no, the webinar that I did, the workshop that I did online, um, did not include them. But
Okay. Well, we maybe should do another one and include them and include some of the people who are running third spaces and other kinds of enterprises. Not so many that it becomes you don't learn anything, but
yeah,
something. This has been a pleasure and exceptionally informative, and I'll see you again soon. This is Dr. Amina Aldin with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. Had a wonderful time with Dr. Ihsan Bagby. And boy, there's just so much. And I need for you to text me the names of the men that are doing the stuff on young Black men.
okay.
We will be back. Salam alaikum.